What if freedom begins in our minds and has nothing to do with the outer circumstances from which we want to be free? What if the outer circumstances were just triggers, divinely inspired to encourage us to find the freedom that lives within? Well, an old rock group, Parliament Funkadelic, said something similar when they said, free your mind and the rest will follow. So let's unpack this a little bit. Let's just take a moment to unpack this. What if thoughts create a vibrational state that attracts a reflection of those thoughts as a reflection of your vibrational state? A Course in Miracles lesson 16 says, everything you see is a reflection of your thoughts. There is no exception to this fact. Thoughts are not big or little, powerful or weak. Thoughts are merely true or false. Those that are false create their likeness, and those that are true create theirs. So let's unpack this a little more in a practical example. So you have a thought that embarrasses you. It turns your face red due to changes in your body's chemistry as your neuropeptides are changed and released, and as your neuropeptides are carried through your central nervous system by electromagnetic impulses. This has physiological changes in your body. The cells in your body change, they vibrate differently, they emanate differently. And when your electromagnetic vibration changes, it radiates from you in the same way that a radiator radiates heat in a room. And as a radiator radiates heat in a room, the room changes, the room gets warmer. Will you change any space that you are in when your vibrational rate changes? So we can change our environment in big or little ways. And it all begins with our thoughts. Now, for some of you, this is Metaphysics 101. And there are a number of metaphysical laws that are simply mirrors of each other that explain this. In metaphysics, some call it the law of inner cause and outer effect. That which is going on within us must show up outside of us. Some of us call it the law of correspondence. That which is happening in our outer world must correspond to our inner energy, for our inner energy creates a corresponding event, experience, or vision in our outer worlds. Some call it the law of attraction. We attract what we are. So how can we use this law to be free of the shame that binds us, the doubt that hobbles us, and the feelings of inadequacy and powerlessness that paralyze us, and the ideas of victimhood that seem to condemn us to the whims of outer circumstances? How can we change from within in order to create a change from without? Well, I asked Spirit, and Spirit gave a new perspective on this. And this perspective has three parts. Number one, loose God. Number two, loose yourself. And number three, loose the world. I'm going to repeat these. Number one, loose God. Number two, loose yourself. Number three, loose the world. And then I was guided to a lesson in A Course in Miracles, lesson 132. I loosed the world from what I thought it was. That's the title of the lesson. And to paraphrase or summarize the essence of it is this. And these are actually words cherry-picked from the lesson. What keeps the world, including yourself, in chains but your beliefs? Yet salvation from these chains is easily achieved because you are free to change your mind. I'm going to repeat that. What keeps the world, including you, in chains? Only your beliefs. Yet you can free yourself from these chains because you are free to change your mind. You must loose God from what you thought God was. You must loose yourself from what you thought you were. And you must loose the world from what you thought the world was. So what do I mean when I say loose God? What I mean by that is get to know God for yourself. One of my favorite books is a book of that title by Marcus Borg. Get to know God for yourself. Get to know God again like you never met God before. Like you never had your mind filled with images of a vengeful, punitive God sitting on a white cloud in a white robe and a white beard. Like you never thought that God showed up in nature as punishing. Like you never thought that God showed up as the outer circumstances in your world against which you thought you were powerless. Get to know God as if you never got conditioned by the external experiences that we attribute to God. Get to know God for yourself. In our minds, we have all kinds of images of God. They're buried in their subconscious and they're camouflaged. It may not feel like a religious teaching, but in the same way that a computer has an underlying operating system, our minds have an underlying operating system that may be based on a vengeful, punitive God. And it's part of our psychological software, deeply ingrained. It may be deeply ingrained in our psychological software that we are not enough. It may be deeply ingrained in our psychological software that there's always someone outside of us looking over our shoulder, criticizing us, judging us, or condemning us. We may not attribute this judgment or our own self-judgment that is a result of this. We may not contribute it to the God of the white robe and the white beard, who's a man, but it is the influence that has caused these thought forms. In the underlying idea that there is this great unseen force that is geared against us, that is continually punishing us or withholding from us. We may not think of it as God. We may see it as the bank. We may see it as the economic system. We may see it as the political system. But these are all substitutes for what we think of God. But this is a second-hand version of God. This is the misunderstood version of God. So we must loose God from what we thought God was. We must loose God from the false idea that it is a force outside of us. We must loose God from the false idea that it is vengeful and punitive. We must loose God from the false idea that it is a power geared against us. And how do we loose God in this way? We loose God in this way by getting to know God for ourselves, not our granny's God, or like that song from the Emotions, Don't Ask My Neighbor, Come to Me. God is saying, don't ask my neighbor if I love you, come to me and I'll show you. So we get to God in meditation. We get to God in prayer. We get to God in communion. We get to God in our daily spiritual practice. And when we have that direct connection with God that everyone is entitled to and that any and every of us can do, especially as the veil has been lifted and the power and the grace and the glory of God is so very evident, as we get to God in this way, we feel God for ourselves. We feel the comfort of God. We feel the succor of God. We feel the peace and the calming embrace of God. We feel the presence of God. And we feel it not from some man on a cloud, but we may feel it from our sister, who also contains the light of God, who says, I've got you. And in that healing moment, we get a glimpse of God. We get a glance of God. But it doesn't have to be a glimpse. It doesn't have to be a glance. It could be an ongoing experience as we continually practice that communion. So the first thing that we can do to free our minds of the false idea that there is something outside of us holding us back. The first thing we can do to free our minds of the false idea that there is a force against us. The first thing we can do to free our minds of the false idea that we are being held in place by something that is holding us against our will, holding us hostage to old beliefs, is to get to know God as we experience God as a loving, liberating, healing, encouraging, uplifting, and empowering force, and the source of all the love, support, comfort, and guidance we have ever yearned to feel. Now, you already did that because our little interaction with our beloved goddess, Reverend Tootle, triggered that in all of us. So this can change our internal operating system. The more we glance upon the real God, the more the fake God that has been foisted upon us has power over us. The more we call on God of love, the less power God of judgment has on us. The more we call on God that brings peace, the less disquiet we experience in our internal energy and in our world. The more we call on the God that is the power that created heaven and earth, the more empowered we feel to create our own heaven here on earth. So we must loose God from what we thought God was in order to make room for God as God would express to us. We must loose God from what we thought God was in order to make room for God as God would express through us as us and express its will for our perfect happiness as we become vessels of it. And this brings me to the second point. We must loose ourselves from what we thought we were, because we forgot we are simply open vessels for the infinite love and light of God to move to us, to move through us, and to express through us to create our perfect happiness and our heaven on earth. So, how can we loose ourselves from what we thought we were? We must remember that we are not the wretched, sinful abominations that we have been told. Now, those are biblical type words, but those words, just as I said before, show up camouflaged. They show up in our unconscious when we believe ourselves to be not enough. In the Genesis story, in Genesis 3:7, Adam and Eve bit the fruit, and all of a sudden, they realized they were naked. All of a sudden, they felt shame. All of a sudden, they felt separate from God. All of a sudden, they felt judged from God. But you know what God said in Genesis? That's what happened in Genesis 3:7. But you know what God said in Genesis 3:11? In Genesis 3:11, God said, "Who told you you were naked?" The implication being, I didn't tell you you were naked. That's a notion that your guilt, when you believe yourself to be separate from me, cooked up in your head. But this is not anything I decreed. This is not something I judge. This is not something I see, for I do not see that shame. I do not see that feeling of inadequacy. I do not see that false belief that you conjured up in your head that you are separate from me and therefore sinful. Who told you you were naked? So the question for each and every one of us is, who told us we were naked? Naked, of course, being symbolic of who told us we were inadequate, who told us we were sinful, who told us there was something wrong with us when God created us and looked upon us and said, and this is good. Who told us we were naked? Well, who told us that? Was a world misinformed. just like Adam and Eve were misinformed. A world that had created this false impression out of guilt because they believed themselves to be separate. But when we get to know God, as part of us, as one with us, as one through us, and when we get to know ourselves as innocent, perfect, whole, and complete, and these are not just trite New Age phrases, but as we feel God's energy and God's light pouring into us, and as we feel God's love filling us and activating the love God created as us, as we feel this blessed union, as we feel this holy embrace, and as we feel the power of this oneness, all those other notions get burned off. All those other notions fall away. All those other notions can be released and replaced by the truth that God would tell us. That God would tell us, you are one with me. For I am not a person, I am simply an energy of love. God would tell us, I created you for my purpose, and I created you as a unique expression in order to fulfill my purpose. And you are created to expand my purpose. You are created for the purpose of joy. And as we release our old versions of ourselves, because just like you put your iPad or your iPhone next to the bed and you plug it in every night and it gets a new software update. And as we get a new software update, we create a new version of ourselves. Like in the morning, when your iPad or your iPhone says you are now version 16.2.4, we can be version 16.God.God. Reflecting God's software. When we feel God's love, the illusion of separateness goes away. The illusion of being sinful and undeserving goes away. And this is not just spiritual theory or hyperbole, for when we know ourselves as God, the darkness of who we thought ourselves to be goes away. And this is not just spiritual hoo-ha, for scientists have now documented that we are actually beings of light. Every cell in your body contains small structures called mitochondria, often referred to as the powerhouse of the cell. And as they convert oxygen and nutrients into usable energy, they also emit an incredibly faint particle of light known as biophotons. We actually glow with this light. So you actually glow with this light. You thought it was just spiritual theory, but scientists have shown it. You are a human lightning bug. Let your light shine. And finally, when you understand yourself to be the light of God, and let's take one of those old gospel songs, Hark, the herald angels sing, you are the light of the world. There is a lesson in A Course in Miracles, I am the light of the world. And that is not egotistical. That is you claiming your God self. That is you claiming your true self. That is you claiming your light and not your darkness. That is you claiming your strength and not your weakness. That is you claiming your deservingness and not your not enoughness. As you loose what you thought you were and claim your divine identity, you and God can loose the world. For when you loose God from what you thought it was, and when you loose yourself from what you thought you were, by default, you loose the world from being God's torture chamber, inherent on punishing you. When you believe God is loving and you believe yourself as lovable, you become a vessel of that love and you channel it out into the world, and the world must reflect it. That's what we talked about in the beginning of this sermon, the law of correspondence. This is a law of God. Know God as love, know yourself as love, and you know the world as a loving playground where love can be shown to you, where love can be felt, where love is expected, where love is reflected. And this is how you loose the world from what you thought it was. And this is how you turn this hellscape of what we think human life to be into the heaven on earth that God intended it to be. We loose ourselves from what we thought God was. We loose ourselves from what we thought we were. And we loose the world in order that it can be something different. So how can we do this in a practical way? through our daily spiritual practice, through our communion with God? What if we felt God's loving presence so profoundly that there was no room to doubt ourselves? What if we felt God's loving presence so profoundly that there was no reason to criticize, judge ourselves, or withhold from ourselves? What if we fought? What if we realized and internalized what A Course in Miracles lessons 100 through 103 say? God's will for you is perfect happiness. What if we agreed with God? And what if we aligned with that will instead of the insane idea of the ego that something's wrong with us and that we may pay and that we must pay penance for our sins? Then we would be the light of the world. Then we would be the light of God. Then we could shine radiantly. Then we could fulfill God's purpose through us confidently, and we would be free from the chains of guilt. We would be free from the chains of uncertainty. We would be free from the chains of victimhood. And let's do a couple of practical examples. Perhaps you're stuck in a job incompatible with your truth and incompatible with your worth. Perhaps you're stuck in any situation incompatible with your truth or incompatible with your worth. Well, it's not your truth and it's not your worth. It's your ego's belief, and it's your ego's belief in your worth. But what if you were not your ego? What if you were not a body? What if you were free? What if you are still as God created you to be? What if love, peace, and joy abided in thee? And what if your sinlessness was guaranteed by God? This is what A Course in Miracles tells us. I am not a body. I am free. I am still as God created me to be. Love, peace, and joy abide in me. And my sinlessness is guaranteed by God. What if this were your mantra? What if this were what caused you to vibrate? What if you vibrated with this energy? I am not a body. I am free. I am still as God created me to be. Love, truth, and peace abide in me. My sinlessness is guaranteed by God. Then you would be the sinless sun, S-U-N, the sinless light, and the world would be a guiltless world, for there is no guilt in you. Then there is no guilt shown to you in the world, and the world's doors would open to you. And what if you forgot? Or what if you never knew of inadequacy, of not enoughness, or of the limits of the body, because you were so fully tapped in to the unlimited nature of your holy self? Well, this is how that can work in the real world. And let me give you an example. I want to talk about this 61-year-old potato farmer named Cliff Young. He entered the ultra marathon, which was a multiple marathon in Australia. It was in 1983. He was already 61 years old. He didn't look like the others because the others were elite athletes. The others had sponsors and fancy shoes, and he showed up in his galoshes covering his farm shoes. The others were young in life, and he was already 61 years old. The others looked at him and laughed. The audience looked at him and laughed, and then the race started. And he didn't run like the others. He didn't look like the others. He didn't act like the others. He didn't run like the others. Now, before we go on, how many of you ever thought like you didn't look like the others? You didn't act like the others. You didn't run like the others. Anybody here ever felt different? Anybody here ever felt the world laughing at them? Anybody ever see the world discounting them for who you thought you were? He thought he was a 61-year-old potato farmer along with all these 20-year-old kids running this ultra marathon. Is it just me that ever felt different? Or did anybody here show me your hands? So the race started just like we run a race of life. He didn't run like a trained athlete. He had a certain shuffle. But you know what else he didn't have? He didn't have all these preconceived notions in his mind. He didn't even know that you were supposed to sleep, because for 61 years, he was on his family's huge farm in the outback. For 61 years, he went nonstop from the edges, walking miles and miles and miles a day, collecting his sheep. For 61 years, he walked around regularly. For 61 years, he slept rarely. For 61 years, he trained for this without even knowing it. So when he got there and he shuffled and they all laughed at him, he just kept shuffling forward, right? When they went down to sleep, he kept shuffling because that's what he was used to doing. When they woke up again, he didn't know he was supposed to sleep, so he kept shuffling. And the first day, he was a few miles ahead of them. The second day, he was a few more miles ahead of them. And on the last day, he beat them all by 10 miles. He won that race. And you know what else? He didn't even know that there was a $10,000 bounty for winning the race. He was just doing it for the heck of it. He didn't know there was a reward. You see, in his mind, there were things he didn't know. And he didn't let what he didn't know confine him. What if you didn't know that you needed to be guilty? What if you didn't know that you were limited? What if you didn't know that there was a force outside of you against you? What could your mind do? His mind won this race because it didn't have those constraints. Well, the grace of God, communion with God, can wipe those constraints away from your mind too. They can free your mind of these constraints and free your world of these constraints. The task here is to commune with God, to go with God, to let God break the chains that your minds have formed, to free your minds and thus free your world, free your vibration of its vibrational chains, and your world will free from the chains you thought held you back in your world. You may have been different, but you are different for God's purpose, and God's purpose must play out in you. Now is the time, and the light of God is so prevalent, the light of God is so powerful, and the light of God is so available. It can change your mind and change your world. Let us all go with God and find the freedom in God that may not have existed in our prior lives. These are new ways to be free. Let's go with God and be free. And this is what I want to share with you today. Thank you.